Hey, and welcome to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case.
And I'm Renata Kiss.
And tonight, the White House defends Biden's growing number of gaffes.
Meanwhile, Netanyahu condemns the U.S. for withholding weapons.
And Boeing CEO testifies before Congress. But first, we begin today with an absolutely stunning report coming from the Congressional Budget Office. Its latest report now estimates that the federal budget deficit will reach $1.9 trillion this fiscal year. That's a whopping 27% increase from February's estimates and 7% of the country's entire GDP. This comes as the national debt is also expected to rapidly expand over the next decade as well, with the CBO predicting it will hit 122% of the GDP by 2034. Currently, it sits at 99%.
And let's continue with an update on Biden's new immigration policy. President Biden announced yesterday that he will expand protections and fast-track the citizenship process for illegal immigrants married to U.S. citizens. His plan could affect up to 500,000 people. The announcement marked the 12th anniversary of the DACA program.
We're much better and stronger nation because of dreamers like Javier, who just introduced me. So today I'm announcing new measures to clarify and speed up work visas to help people, including dreamers, who have graduated from U.S. colleges and universities, landed jobs in high-demand, high-skilled professions that we need to have grow to see our economy grow.
But conservatives are already criticizing the executive order as nothing but a Democrat ploy to influence the upcoming elections. For instance, former President Trump accused Biden of using illegal immigrants for political gain.
When I'm reelected, Joe Biden's illegal amnesty plan will be ripped up and thrown out on the very first day that we're back in office. Because he's just using that group. But he's going to let everybody come in because you know what they're trying to do? They're trying to sign these people up and register them. They're not citizens. They're not allowed to do it. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to use all of these people that are pouring into our country to vote.
Likewise, President Biden accused Trump of only caring about his electability when the bipartisan border bill failed to pass.
When Republicans walked away from the deal for the most pathetic and petty of reasons, Donald Trump got on the phone literally and started, and the press can confirm this, and calling senators saying, don't go ahead and do this. Don't support this legislation that had bipartisan support. And when you ask why, he said it would hurt him politically and help me instead. So much for Republicans caring about the border.
Tensions surrounding the border crisis are heating up as this will be an important issue for American voters in November.
Meanwhile, the White House is brushing off Biden's recent gaffes. FISM's Ian Patrick has more.
Recent videos of President Biden looking lost and needing direction have once again brought up concerns over his mental health. But when brought before White House officials, the problem is being dismissed as nothing more than a Republican ploy. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was questioned on these scenes during a Monday press briefing. For example, at a weekend fundraiser for Biden's campaign, videos began circulating of the president being led away by former President Barack Obama. The video was shared to social media sites like X, with many responders saying that Biden froze on stage and needed to be rescued by Obama. But when pressed on this issue, Jean-Pierre said the scene was an example of just their longtime friendship.
Let's not forget, President Obama, President Biden have a relationship. They are friends. They're like family to each other. And I think that's what you saw. You saw the president put his hand on the back of President Biden, and they walked off the stage after taking questions or at an event taking questions from Jimmy Kimmel.
Some Democrats attempted to share a different angle from the video to disprove this freezing accusation, but ironically, it didn't seem to show anything different or unusual from any of the other shared clips. But back to Jean-Pierre, she was also asked about Biden's recent visit with G7 leaders. The clip being shared there showed Biden walking away from the other Western leaders and seemingly speaking to a nearby soldier. But he was then redirected for a photo op by Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Those who viewed the clip expressed embarrassment at the president needing aid from foreign leaders to know where to go and what to do. But Jean-Pierre said these accusations and the clip which they are based off of are all part of what she called cheap fake.
As I said, it was a cheap, a cheap fake. That was definitely a cheap fake. It was. This was widely fact-checked. That video was widely fact-checked, including by conservatives media, on what happened, what occurred. The president walked over to give a thumbs up to divers who had just landed right in front of him. And if you run that tape a little bit longer, you would see what was happening, what the president was actually doing, and it is a cheap fake.
And finally, Jean-Pierre spoke of the White House Juneteenth celebration, which showed the president standing and staring at a performance while others were moving to the music. Again, some who saw this video alleged that the president found himself frozen and unable to move. But Jean-Pierre said that focusing on the president's lack of dancing is a weird thing to point out.
The president stood there listening to the music and he didn't dance. Excuse me, I did not know not dancing was a health issue. That is a weird thing to actually flag when if you look at the people who are around him, you look at the expanded video of the people who were around him, they were not. There were some folks who were not dancing either.
Mostly, however, Jean-Pierre doubled down on her accusation of cheap fakes, saying that Republicans are doing this instead of focusing on the president's career accomplishments.
These videos are false. They're purposefully being altered. I think that tells you everything that you need to do by looking at his record. And what you're seeing right now is Republicans, instead of talking what I just talked about, they're really diving into these cheap fake videos. And it's in bad faith. That's what I'm saying.
But regular Americans might disagree. Polls as far back as spring of 2023 show that American voters are expressing consistent concern over the president's mental health. And it doesn't seem as though Jean-Pierre's answers will be satisfying those concerns. This is Ian Patrick reporting for FISM News.
Thanks for that report, Ian. Meanwhile, yesterday, a New York court declined to hear a gag order appeal from former President Donald Trump. The New York Court of Appeals said it dismissed the request because it didn't relate to the Constitution. Trump had sought to remove the gag order from his hush money case involving adult film star Stormy Daniels. He was found guilty of 34 felony counts last month, and Trump's lawyers argued that the gag order should be lifted now that the case is over. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office opposed lifting the order, arguing that it helped to avoid threats to the fairness of the trial itself.
And Congressman Matt Gaetz is still in hot water as the House Ethics Committee says it's continuing its investigation into the Florida Republicans' alleged misconduct. The committee said yesterday it has finished investigating whether he accepted bribes or converted campaign funds for personal use, but it's still looking into much more serious allegations, including sexual misconduct and illicit drug use. As you may remember, Gaetz was the congressman who led the ouster of Speaker Kevin McCarthy last October. McCarthy has long claimed that Gaetz wanted him out simply because of these ethics investigations.
And I'll give you the truth why I'm not Speaker. It's because one person, a member of Congress, wanted me to stop an ethics complaint because he slept with a 17-year-old. An ethics complaint that started before I ever became Speaker, and that's illegal, and I'm not going to get in the middle. Did he do it or not? I don't know. But ethics is looking at it. There's other people in jail because of it. And he wanted me to influence it.
Gaetz denies any wrongdoing in any of these cases and accuses McCarthy's allies of targeting him with, quote, frivolous investigations.
And finally, before a break here, the Republican primary race in Virginia's 5th congressional district is still too close to call following yesterday's election. Virginia State Senator John McGuire is leading Freedom Caucus Chairman Bob Good by less than 400 votes. Despite over 95% of the vote being in, the results of the primary are unlikely to be known for days. Neither candidate plans to bow out until the results are final. Good is facing a particularly tough challenge after choosing not to endorse former President Trump in the Republican primary in favor of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Although Good later endorsed Trump after DeSantis withdrew from the primary, the former president still encouraged and endorsed a primary challenge. His opponent has also received support from former House Speaker McCarthy's Majority Committee PAC after Good voted to remove the former speaker last year. And we'll get into international news when we come back from this break, so don't go anywhere.
Navigating through investment options can be challenging, especially when you're determined to uphold your God-given values. Every dollar you invest is a vote for the world that you want to live in. Let your values guide your investment decisions and help to shape the culture in which we live. Become a beacon of light and pave the way with biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, where faith and finance collide. Before investing, carefully consider the fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses of the investment company. This and other important information can be found in the fund's prospectus. To obtain a copy, visit timothyplan.com or call 800-846-7526. Read each prospectus carefully before investing. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal.
When a woman experiences an unplanned pregnancy, she's faced with a difficult decision. Preborn connects with life-affirming pregnancy clinics across the nation and provides them with free ultrasound sessions for expectant mothers. When a mother sees her baby on an ultrasound and hears their heartbeat, it doubles the chance she'll choose life. Visit preborn.com/life to save a baby's life.
Fear and uncertainty can cause us to hold things tightly and rely on ourselves. But during uncertain times, as believers in Christ, we are called to surrender fully to our sovereign God. Learn a biblically responsible investment strategy proven over 25 years. Keep the money God has entrusted to you out of companies that participate in things that God detests. Fully surrender. Become a Financial Issues Partners today.
Welcome back to FISM News. I'm Renata Kiss. Well, let's start in Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu heavily criticized the Biden administration for withholding weapons.
When Secretary Blinken was recently here in Israel, we had a candid conversation. I said I deeply appreciated the support the U.S. has given Israel from the beginning of the war. But I also said something else. I said it's inconceivable that in the past few months, the administration has been withholding weapons and ammunition to Israel. During World War II, Churchill told the United States, give us the tools, we'll do the job. And I say, give us the tools and we'll finish the job a lot faster.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken defended the Biden administration's actions by saying that the U.S. understands the gravity of the Israel-Gaza conflict. He added that President Biden will do everything he can to make sure Israel has what it needs to effectively defend itself against these threats. The Biden administration had paused one military aid shipment in May out of concern for Rafah. The shipment would have included bombs ranging from 1,800 to 2,000 pounds and bombs in the 1,700 and 500-pound range. The administration said that these bombs could result in mass casualties in highly populated areas. But on the other hand, the Washington Post reports that the Biden administration has put heavy pressure on two key Democrats in Congress to support an $18 billion worth of military aid for Israel recently. The representatives finally gave in on Monday.
And it looks like Netanyahu's comments are causing quite a stir inside the White House. According to Axios, officials in the White House are furious with the prime minister and have even canceled a meeting with Israeli officials to discuss Iran's nuclear program as a result. That meeting was set to take place tomorrow following a new intelligence report saying Tehran has now acquired a new computer program used to develop nuclear weapons. And at the same time, the UN's nuclear watchdog also warned this week on Monday that Iran is speeding up its uranium enrichment process. One White House official said canceling the meeting makes it clear to Netanyahu that there are consequences for pulling such stunts.
Meanwhile, the Biden administration continues to play both sides in the conflict, even as Hezbollah attacks increase in the northern part of Israel. The Biden administration has been pressuring the Jewish nation not to retaliate against Hezbollah's attacks for fear that it would escalate into a wider war. But according to Israeli residents, that request is unreasonable. About 100,000 residents have been forced out of their homes due to almost daily attacks from Hezbollah. Major Shadi Khalul, who serves in the IDF's reserves, told CBN News that he questions the Biden administration's understanding of the conflict. He said that the war is not about territory, but about ideology. He explained that the goal of Hezbollah is to eliminate the Jewish nation because the westernized country's values oppose Sharia law. Khalul also warned that if Israel can't fight back promptly, Hezbollah might get ready to destroy Israel and move on to other parts of Europe.
And moving away from the war in Israel to the war in Ukraine, which is now claiming responsibility for an overnight drone strike on a Russian oil factory in the southern border region. A Ukrainian official told AP News that Ukraine's spy agency is the one behind that strike. It triggered a massive blaze covering some 55,000 square feet. Russia does say that there were no deaths in the strike. It is the latest in a series of long-distance attacks targeting Russian energy infrastructure, as Ukraine has launched 20 similar strikes this year alone, targeting specifically refineries and depots in an effort to stop Russia.
At the same time, thousands of NATO troops are conducting military drills in the Baltic Sea, a strategically sensitive region following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. 20 ally members are participating in the exercises, and that includes the newest member, Sweden, who has previously joined in the drills. Training focuses on sea minesweeps, submarine detection, landings, and medical responses. But each drill calls for precision because of the major gas pipelines that supply energy to Europe that run along the seabed. Those pipes make regional stability important to the transatlantic alliance.
And before we go to a moment in history here, tensions are still heating up between North and South Korea as South Korea fired warning shots yesterday when more than 20 North Korean soldiers briefly crossed the military demarcation line. Now, it should be understood this crossing here is widely believed to be simply an accident, but it is the second time it's happened in just 2 weeks. Both sides recently scrapped an agreement banning training exercises around the border between the North and South. South Korea says it's now closely monitoring North Korean military activities, while at the same time guarding against accidental situations. All right, and up next, we have plenty more news to get to in religion, culture, business, and more. But first, let's go to Seth Udinsky for today's A Moment in History.
Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinsky. Well, in today's segment, let's go back to the 1830s and turn our attention to the proud state of Texas. Today, we'll explore the turning point in the Texan War for Independence in one of the most recognized battles in military history, the Battle of the Alamo. Though the Texans ultimately lost this battle, their sacrificial courage was an inspiration to the state and to the United States, actually, which it would join 10 years later after winning its independence from Mexico. Now, the Alamo itself was once a Spanish Catholic mission house built on the banks of the San Antonio River in 1718 by Spaniards. These colonists transformed it into a military base in the early 1800s and renamed it El Alamo in the 1820s. Now, Mexico seized control of the city in San Antonio during their own war for independence against Spain, not long after a migration of U.S. citizens into the region of Texas began, which would stir up the cause for independence. And in 1835, the Texan War for Independence began. Now, in December of that city, Texan soldiers regained control of San Antonio and the Alamo, and the vastly superior Mexican army regrouped and prepared to retake the city of San Antonio. An attack on the Alamo was imminent. Knowing they'd be severely outnumbered, the Texan volunteers, among whom was the legendary soldier Davy Crockett, chose to remain at the Alamo and defend it. On February 23, 1836, the battle began. Historians estimate that as many as 6,000 Mexican soldiers laid siege on the Alamo against fewer than 200 Texas defenders. The Texans fought courageously and heroically for 13 grueling days before the Mexican troops at last broke through the Alamo walls, killing almost every single one of the brave 200. The heroic stand at the Alamo inspired the remaining forces, and in April of 1836, Texas won its independence from Mexico during the decisive Battle of San Jacinto in April of 1836. The Texan troops surged to victory with a stirring battle cry, "Remember the Alamo." And of course, a decade later, Texas would join the U.S. during its own war with Mexico in the 1840s, and the American soldiers repeated this exact same battle cry in war. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.
It was sobbing. It was a cry for prayer for God. I'm so sorry, please. So I got on the internet and I just started seeing like abortion pill reversal, and I found a hotline number. We're gonna get this started, and it's gonna seem like a lot, but it's gonna be so fast, and it's because you only have a certain amount of time left. It's gonna be okay. We got this. We're gonna try to fix this for you and make sure you know you're good and the baby's good. Don't worry. And when I came here, my heart was so warm. Other than Planned Parenthood, where I was very cold and I was lost, and I just felt like I could have been, it was just terrible. And to know that Compass Care could tell me something different and get reverse a medication like that, that's amazing. That somebody would go as hard as if it was their children to make sure your child is gonna be alive and stay safe, So I want a lot of people to know it's possible. You can save your baby. You can reverse that abortion.
Hey there, and welcome back to FISM News. I'm Samuel Case. We start out with a bit of a weather update today, where Americans across the Midwest and Northeast, well, they're doing their very best to try to beat the heat, but it is tough, as roughly 80 million Americans are under at least some sort of heat advisory this week, with several cities experiencing record-breaking temperatures. Most areas will see temperatures somewhere in the 90s, but experts say that some places could get even hotter than that.
We're going to be looking at a lot of these places all above 90 degrees. You factor in humidity as well. It's going to feel like it's over 100. But some places in the Northeast are going to get a little hotter, depending on where you're located, like Albany, New York, Hartford, Connecticut, even parts of Vermont and New Hampshire. Some of those areas that are on the east side, downsloping wind, they could experience temperatures well into the 90s, even approaching 100 degrees.
That was AccuWeather's Paul Pastelok. Temperatures are expected to peak around this weekend, but they are also expected to still stay high into next week. Meanwhile, out west, wildfires continue to just ravage parts of California and New Mexico. Thousands of people have been forced to evacuate because of those fires, and sadly, in New Mexico, at least one person has died.
Meanwhile, turning to some news in business, Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun testified before Congress yesterday regarding his airline's multiple mechanical failures. Democrats and Republicans questioned Boeing's commitment to safety and quality when reports showed that the company retaliated against its whistleblowers. Here's Republican Senator Josh Hawley calling out the CEO for the lack of safety standards.
The FAA also says that Boeing still has not implemented the recommended steps back from 2019 and 2020 after the MAX crashes. You still have not taken the appropriate safety procedures or implemented what they recommended. We've had multiple whistleblowers come before this committee and allege that Boeing is cutting every possible corner on quality and safety, not just in the past, but now.
Calhoun denied most of the allegations. Instead, he said he was very proud of Boeing and its employees.
Senator, I don't recognize any of the Boeing you described. Senator, I'm sticking this through. I'm proud of having taken the job. I'm proud of our safety record, and I am very proud of our Boeing people.
You're proud of this safety record?
I am proud of every action we have taken.
Every action you've taken?
Yes, sir.
Head of the FAA, Mike Whitaker, told Congress that Boeing's safety culture needs a fundamental shift to address quality and safety challenges. The FAA is currently overseeing these functions at Boeing.
Well, hopefully they can get that sorted out very soon. Elsewhere, in some pro-life news, a federal judge has blocked, at least in 2 states, a new federal rule forcing employers to accommodate abortions. Louisiana, Missouri, and multiple Catholic organizations are still challenging that rule. They say the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission had absolutely no authority to add elective abortions to the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act, and the judge in this case happened to agree. That new rule went into effect yesterday, forcing employers to give paid time off specifically for abortions. The only exceptions will now be in Louisiana and Missouri after they were granted a preliminary injunction that same day. This comes only days after a federal judge down in Arkansas refused to block the rule for 17 other states last week.
And meanwhile, over on the West Coast, California's Senate approved a bill that would allow schools to hide the students' gender identity information from their parents. The Senate passed a proposal yesterday along party lines to protect LGBT students from disapproving parents. Democrat lawmakers argued that students should be able to come out on their own terms, while Republicans argued that schools are obligated to be transparent with parents. They said the state should not dictate parental notification policies in schools. One Republican state senator added that involving parents in this topic is the best way to ensure that a solution which works for everyone can be found. Vice President of the California Family Council, Greg Burt, said that the government shouldn't assume that every parent is unsafe. He emphasized that should not be the assumption.
Now, interesting, not that this is going to radically shift the politics in California, but I have seen interviews with Democrats who say that they are not a fan of these types of policies, really splitting off parents from their kids when it comes to gender and sexuality. So I'm curious if there is going to be some blowback here.
I hope so. I know obviously California is a very progressive, very Democrat majority, but I hope that in this case, common sense would win.
Yeah, especially when it comes to your own kids. It's
right,
a very
exactly.
emotional, personal thing, understandably. So you think
right.
that just might override your personal politics.
Right. I think otherwise it would be a pretty slippery slope and pretty scary for most parents.
Yeah. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. Ending today on some more controversial news. That is Pfizer is once again in the legal crosshairs, as this week Kansas AG Chris Kobach, he sued the medical giant for allegedly covering up the risks related to its COVID-19 vaccine. Those risks include myocarditis and allegedly miscarriages as well.
Pfizer marketed its vaccine as safe for pregnant women. However, in February of 2021, Pfizer possessed reports for 458 pregnant women who received Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine during pregnancy. More than half of the pregnant women reported an adverse event, and more than 10% reported a miscarriage.
Kobach also claims that Pfizer lied about the vaccine's effectiveness against new variants of the virus and its ability to stop transmission.
Pfizer urged Americans to get vaccinated in order to protect their loved ones, clearly indicating a claim that Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccination stopped transmission of COVID-19. Pfizer later admitted that it had never even studied transmission of it after its recipients received the vaccine and whether they could say it stopped transmission.
Texas filed a similar lawsuit against Pfizer last year. The company issued a statement saying all its claims about the vaccine have been accurate and science-based.
All right, well, that's our program for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and please visit FISMnews.tv for more content.
And if you're on social media, be sure to check us out on there as well. You can also download the FISM app so you can take our news wherever you go. Thanks so much. God bless, and we'll catch you tomorrow night with more news. See you then.